Just before I sit down, I just wanted to say thanks, guys, for doing this, and thanks, guys, for actually applauding to this, because even though we did this video about 2 years ago, it took about a few years of really understanding what our brand is about, and it's ironic because we're 21 years old. I mean, we're actually older than some of you, which is really wild, because I mean, you know, we feel older every day, but you know, it takes a long time to figure out what it is that you do, not as like actually executing, but when you create a product and a brand, what it actually stands for. And the hardest thing to do is to describe it in a few words. So we're still working through that. But you know, the one thing that we always knew is that sort of the certain emotion about what it meant for us. And it's not about what product you buy, because fresh products are really there. It's sort of, it's a feel-good beauty. It's something that, you know, they're just as indulgent as they're effective, so they provide you the results, but the fact is that the experience of using them has to be just as special. And by doing that, obviously, it takes you into a personal experience of your own. And in a way, and what's important for every one of us, I mean, yes, you know, there's so many other things in life that interfere, but at the end of the day, when you come home, when you go to bed, or when you're, you know, in the shower, naked in the bathroom by yourself without the phone, what really matters to you? It's not about product, brands. It's really about what's important in your life. And anything else that you provide and bring in is basically going to be just, you know, the tools. So just remember that. That's really important.
It's such, you know, I'm struck by that. Have a seat.
Obviously, I really love director's chairs because I'm not looking forward to sit down.
That's not easy to do, to convey your brand in images and words and to make it flow. I mean, it's so intensely personal. Your family's in the real. But that's sort of the essence of any authentic brand, is it has to really speak to your core values and your philosophy. And you must have, when you finally finished it, you must have said, that is special.
Well, I mean, I get emotional looking at it, not just because it's my family, but also I remember what, you know, it took us through. And I think that it happens to be a really important part of what you do everyday basis, and I think maybe it's really special to me, and I said yes on the spot, and it wasn't just the reason that I knew I was coming to LA in the winter, because that was. But the fact is that, you know, my oldest daughter is 19 and she just started college, so, you know, it's a fascinating thing of what we went through, and she doesn't know what she wants to do, but she found this whole sort of story about, you know, book that was called Colleges That Change Lives. And you know, she pursued that, and she ended up at Bennington, and she loves it. But I think it's one of those things where, you know, we have so much pressure as to deciding what we want to do in life by everybody, our parents, everybody around. I mean, I'm sure you remember when you started, you know, for 2 years before you even went to college, everybody asked you, where are you going? What is it you're going to do? You know, and you know what? You really never know. You don't. I went to this interesting meeting where they actually, it was very much related to this, and they asked the whole audience, and there was maybe 500 people, maybe 800 people, it's huge. How many people knew what they wanted to do when they started school? So a lot of hands went up. The next question was, hold your hands up if you were actually doing it when you finished college. Half of the hands went down. And the next question was, keep your hands up if you're still doing it 10 years later. There was no hands left. I mean, it's just kind of a whole dynamic of, you know, you're always going to be open to change. And as much as certain things seem really, really important right now, because if you feel like if you're not going to do it, it's death, it's the end. You know what? There's an old Russian expression, you know, when God closes the window, he opens the windshield. Now, this is a translation, and it's not very good, but I'm sure there is like sort of an equivalent to that. But it really is, and I think this is the part where you might not know where this is going to be, you know, that little piece of window. But you just have to be open to it. I don't know how to describe how you train your instinct, you don't. But I think maybe sometimes when you can take a moment and not to pressure yourself with logical reasons why you shouldn't do it, you just sort of let it flow to think, why shouldn't you? I mean, if you don't make mistakes when you're young, like when can you? Because, you know, we all make mistakes even when we're old. But at least, like, this is the time to do it. And you know what? It's never going to be as traumatic. Because even if you don't know what you did wrong, because, you know, I have to disagree sometimes, you know, you make mistakes and you say, okay, you know, if you make mistakes, you know, then you learn from them and you move on. But how do you know that you're going to learn from the first time you make that mistake? I mean, sometimes you might make it like 3 times until you realize, I mean, how many times do I hit my head on the wall until I realize this is not the right thing to do? Even though everything points to the fact that it is. So I'm diverting.
No, but that's actually the essence of this experience that we're trying to do. Is we are trying to, not just through experiences, but through tools and frameworks, give the students things that they can use, that they can sort of get out of their comfort zone and know when they're getting out of the comfort zone, how to figure out what you want to do, how to align your goals with your actions and beliefs and attitudes and actions, all of that. So it's right on point. And you know, when you're 18 to 22, things don't look like they're lining up because you don't have enough access points. But there's probably something that's already happened in your life. I'm sure there definitely is many things, but that are already sort of setting you on a path. I'm not saying destiny, none of that, no certainty. But you look back on it and you can say, you know, you can see why she gravitated towards certain things, and you're going to see why, you know, you do later. But let's sort of start there, because before we get sort of to, well, let's talk just really briefly, you know, like a 1-minute overview of Fresh today, of where the brand is in terms of scope, distribution, products, and sort of where it stands.
Okay. Well, you know, we say Fresh is a beauty company. We're a skincare company. That's really how we describe ourselves. We are, you know, an American company, although, you know, it was founded by myself and Lev Glazman. We're both Russian and Ukrainian immigrants. So, but, you know, sort of I grew up here, and in a way how we run our business, even from the beginning when we, you know, was just 2 of us, I mean, we always approached it as something that is an American business in America, utilizing the best of the world, possibly. But, you know, at this point, 21 years into the business, we have 15 stores, our own stores. 14 are in the States, 5 actually in California. We have 3 in LA area and 1 in South Coast Plaza, San Francisco, Vegas, Dallas, and 5 in New York City. Obviously, they're very brand locations. You know, we're not sort of pursuing a huge retail network of our own, because we do have some wholesale partners that, you know, we have very sort of productive relationship with. One of them being Sephora. I'm sure you all know what that is. I mean, they have 270 stores in this country. We are number 2 to number 1 skincare brand in Sephora as of last year, and that's a pretty big deal, because we started with 10 doors, and you know, when we started with them, we were sort of a, you know, what's called an indie brand. We've in Neiman Marcus and Barney's and some specialty stores. We have 4 doors in Hong Kong, and it's under Fresh Hong Kong. We just opened China mainland. We have a shop-in-shop in Beijing and a freestanding store in Shanghai that just opened last month. We've been in South Korea for about 7 years. We're not in Europe, ironically. But you know, it's in a way, I mean, this is one of the unique things about Fresh on respect to distribution question is we actually have been in as of a, I mean, obviously we're sort of an upscale brand. We're not an inexpensive product, which I will explain why. But sort of we have an appeal to a very wide range of people attitudes. It's really about an attitude, not the cost. The cost of the product really drives from what the quality of the product is and what it is. And I know that it means different things to different people. Obviously, the best-selling product in Fresh is a lip balm. It's $22.50. And I know that, you know, that sounds crazy, but there's something to having a product that actually answers your needs and have the kind of experience and the quality and the result that a lot of other things don't. But that's besides the point. I'm not here to sell our products at all.
Well, I will. So how many people work at Fresh?
I think probably at this point, probably about 200. I mean, it's sort of
through all the stores and everything.
It's yes, because obviously, you know, we have our partner is LVMH, which is Louis Vuitton Marie Hennessy, which partnered with Fresh in 2000. I'm sorry, I'm breaking this part, but obviously there's some shared service center and distribution center where people are not directly employees of Fresh.
Okay.
But you know, as the distribution grows, and also you know, there's a major plan for just growing in China as well. So there's a lot of new people are coming on board. So I think the head count is constantly changing.
Okay. Well, then let's before we're going to cover the business in detail. Let's sort of talk about your background to give it some context. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Ukraine at the time when it was the Soviet Union. It wasn't a separate country. It was early 60s. It was the time of the Cold War. Let's put it parallel as when I came here and I was 16 years old, I had met a lot of people that had no idea whether people in Russia still, were wild or brushed their teeth, or if the bears walked on the street. I grew up in actually a large city in Ukraine, which isn't really that known, although it is on the globes and the maps now because it is an open international city, but at the time it was closed to foreigners. So the one sort of ironic part about this, it was almost 2 million people that lived in that city, but it was completely not exposed to the outside world. Of course, at the time, most of us weren't really exposed to the outside world. You had a situation where you couldn't really travel even as a tourist. Some lucky people had gone to, Eastern European countries, but as far as the West, I remember watching a documentary about America, and it was called The American Contrasts. And what it showed was Manhattan, sort of like they would be showing the Fifth Avenue and the luxury stores, and then the next shot would be like showing sort of Spanish Harlem and sort of like the slums. And it was sort of trying to point how, tough the capitalism is and, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, this was the years of propaganda. So a lot of sort of things, and as much as, we went to school and we worked hard and we had to read a lot, a lot of that really came from the books. Sort of the image of the world and the knowledge of what was going on and other cultures just came from books. So, I just was compulsively reading.
We'll talk about your interests, size of your family.
I'm an only child. It was a sort of a 3 people, my parents and myself. It wasn't uncommon. Actually, most of my friends came from, sort of a one-child family. Women worked. There was really no opportunities to have a lot of sort of living space. A lot of times, young married couples lived with their parents, so it's not like they could really reproduce. And so it's very, yes, there was also no issues of, choice pro-life, because it was a choice all the way, because obviously people had to deal with life.
And what did your parents do for work?
Both of my parents are engineers, actually mechanical engineers. Both very talented design engineers, actually. And, there was something sort of, I think from the beginning, the way, and maybe, if some of you have sort of a recent immigrant generation, so you hear from your grandparents or parents, there's a certain part about the drive about sort of achieving something or getting somewhere that it seems to be sometimes it's almost overwhelmingly so, like that you have this role that you have to fulfill. You have to get somewhere. I could sort of, I was signed up for music school when I was 7, so I had to play the piano because, ultimately maybe my parents thought that would be an easier thing, easier profession to achieve because I'm a Russian Jew. So back in those days, being Jewish did not mean you were a religious Jew because there was really no religion in the state. But what it meant, it was called your nationality. So it's literally like in your passport, you were either Russian or Ukrainian or Jewish. And it wasn't sort of a secret, it was actually something that was pointed to quite a lot. So I've experienced a lot of prejudice from a very young age. I knew, well, obviously, my last name is Roythberg, it's a Jewish last name. So, you couldn't hide that. And, for no reason at all, just for the fact that my last name was Jewish, it was something that, you sort of experience a lot of personal anti-Semitism. Including an English teacher who would, sort of accuse of a student who is answering a lesson at the blackboard and he doesn't know what he's talking about. And she would sort of tell him that, he's behaving like a Jew. And this is 4th grade. So you have to understand this is sort of, there you're growing up without sort of any kind of background to that. But at the same time, you hate the fact that you don't have the option of doing whatever you want when time will come to go to school. And because basically, a college will find a way to fail you, even though I was an A student, I was a really good student. Because I had no choice. Both of my parents were really, really pushy in that respect. And you have to understand, both of them came from sort of very working class families. Both of my parents were the first ones to go to university. My grandmother only had 4 years of school. And she wrote, it's funny because in my first year of Parsons, she wrote me letters once a month. And the letter consisted of 1 page without any punctuation mark. It was literally like 1 sentence. And basically the whole content of the letter was that, go to the cafeteria and try to eat well. I mean, and then in that envelope there'll be a $20 bill or a $10 bill, depending on the month, how well she did. But, this is sort of the dynamic of a history, but the strength that she had and the work ethic that she had was amazing. And, when you were, in those days, you love your grandparents or parents, but you not necessarily know why, I think that as you get much older and you look back, or maybe when somebody asks you a question, you sort of find a reason why. And all of a sudden, it's just, oh my God, this is like eureka, this clear. I mean, this is where I get it from, It's gotta be it.
So at 16, your family leaves the Ukraine, and you've sort of given a little bit of the background of why. You're 16 years old. There are four of you, the two parents and maternal grandmother.
Yeah.
So when you leave the Ukraine to go to Europe and then eventually to the U.S., what can you take with you?
Well, actually, in order to, at the time, this is late 70s, 1978. So as you're leaving sort of the Soviet Union, you are the traitor of the Soviet Union, so you're getting the exit visas and you lose your status. So during those days, basically, so in order to get the exit visa, they would exchange $90 per person. So you could also ship some sort of heavy, about 750, about 1,000 pounds worth of things in advance. It's none of them really are valuable. I mean, we're talking, and it's funny because I could laugh about it. Well, even if it was, I mean, it's not like we had any. But we basically, the family left Russia and traded sort of their documents, about $300.
So family gives up everything it has, $90 per person you're allowed to leave, and it just sort of, that doesn't sort of define what your family
Well, I think we were
stands
fortunate, obviously, there was a process and we were supported through this philanthropic organization that actually helped us to get to the States. For me, I think at 16, what mattered really was an opportunity to see the world even on the way to coming to the States, because it wasn't really, I didn't have to I didn't worry about the ultimate future. My parents did. They had to worry about how they're going to sort of settle here and learn the language. Well, we all spoke a little bit of English, but still, will you ever be able to get a professional job or, support your family and move forward?
So your family goes from Vienna to Rome and then ultimately settles in Boston.
Yes.
And you're now 16, you're
going to high school.
Going to high school. What was sort of, the first lesson or the biggest difference between high school in Boston and high school in the Ukraine?
Whoa. I think that, it's the one thing that was ultimately probably the most amazing part is that actually seeing a catalog of courses. I mean, obviously, when I was going to school in Russia, you had you're given academic program and you had to do it. It wasn't a situation where you could choose anything. And here you were, opening this book with 300 electives. It's still, I went to Brookline High School in Boston, which is still one of the amazing schools that have a lot of different electives and options to really round your education. So, you could take things like philosophy and political history and, and I could also, I just took a lot of art courses because I actually wanted to be a designer since I was 11. So when I was still in Russia, part of the fact of knowing that I wasn't going to be able to really achieve my goal was the fact that, I knew my logistical information didn't fit, and I don't think I would ever be able to go to fashion school in Russia. So when we got here, it was no question for me. I had to do, as much drawing and painting and get ready and fulfill my dream of going to New York and study fashion.
So before that, you moved to Boston. Your parents both find jobs in engineering pretty quickly,
yeah.
And within a couple years, they buy a house. You tell them you want to go to art school. Maybe they can relate to, how does that go over with the parents initially?
Not well. I think this is, there's, and I think probably some of you guys will know what I'm talking about, in some families, some cultures, there's only few professions that they understand, one of them being a doctor, a lawyer, engineer, and that's it, pretty much. So I think that the idea of, somebody actually going into fashion design, I mean, we're not even talking about an artist, we're talking about a designer, it's a commercial profession. And it's definitely is. No, it was hard. And I think, being an only child, and it was like, well, you're going to New York. And for me, actually, I think I lived and dreamed about going to New York even before I came to America, reading O. Henry stories about the Industrial Revolution and the early days of New York City and, $6 a week sales girl salaries, still being able to buy a hat, I mean, there's sort of imagining finally becoming part of that city, which I did.
And so you graduate from high school and you go to the Parsons School of Design. So that's 4 years. While at Parsons, you meet some great people, you learn a lot. Who were some of the people in your class at Parsons?
It's interesting how times have changed because, Parsons actually always had a really great reputation as a design school, and particularly in the fashion department, it's very, very strong, sort of very coveted. We started out 75 people in our class, and we graduated about 45. It was tough going, but it's really my year produced quite a few really notable people. I mean, Mark graduated with me in my class. Mark Jacobs, Tracy Reese. I don't know if you're familiar with that. There's a couple of other people. So, it's sort of interesting to think about it. Apparently, the 1984 was a good year.
It's a pretty powerful class. And if there was sort of
But, us sitting around in the third floor lounge smoking cigarettes during lunch and talking about London, I mean, that's my memory of Mark, so. And I didn't have all my hair on my head, and, this was the 80s, we're all punky.
She was complete punk. I was sort of, looking to get that. Apparently she has gone and censored the internet, and those are no longer available. But we don't want to embarrass her. But she said, my hair was like straight up. And
there was no internet. Yeah, no, we were talking about culture and texture, and it was really fun days to be in New York, and a lot of things were going on culturally, art, music. I mean, you went to school and you studied a lot, and you obviously there are studio classes, so you spend a lot of time doing that, and but then instead of sleeping, of course, you want to do other things, and the opportunities were amazing to do it because. You watch them on TV shows that try to reproduce the 80s, but the truth of the matter was it's really not, because it was a lot more gritty, a lot more raw, and the music was a lot more exciting than what you think is 80s music is now. It's really funny. But, I'm introducing, my daughters to certain music, which is really interesting, just to the fact that nobody was listening to that then, but people are listening to it now, and that's really cool.
What a great experience. First job out of Parsons, what are you doing?
So I finished, I'm a design assistant in a company that does sort of sportswear and suits and coats. It's kind of it's an interesting thing. I mean, for me, speaking back to what we started, because I knew what I wanted to do, so I actually was doing it. And I know that it's a few sort of lucky people that get to do it. And I am still very grateful for the fact that I actually knew. And I can't complain about that I didn't get a chance to do it. So, I mean, yes, it's tough and whatever. And, the sample makers and the pattern makers, the Italians and the Spanish and the Germans are really rough, and they think you're, just a young person out of whatever. But, it takes some time, and you prove to them that you know what you're doing, or you learn from them. But it was a great experience. And I worked for sort of a couple of different jobs, from sort of the upscale, expensive clothes where, when you sell something that's successful, you cut about 250 jackets, And then I got a job at Kellwood, which is a large Fortune 500 company that did private label products for, like JCPenney's and Sears and, J. Crew and Gap. So all of a sudden, if you do something that's really strong, you got 150,000. So I used to, come home to Boston and say, I dress in America. But the thing is that, it's sort of, I don't think that at the time I thought that I would be doing anything else, because I thought I would just move sort of with fashion and work for different things in different product. But, this is sort of an example of like life interferes. There was an opportunity that came up, and I think I was in New York for 10 years, and, I maybe started thinking about I wanted to go somewhere else. And I saw a job advertised to do a design line for a licensed line that was actually in Boston. And it's kind of funny because you don't go back, but in a way I sort of felt like I could try, and I decided to take the job, and I did. So I actually moved to Boston. One of the healthier parts of it was also that, obviously there was definitely an improvement in apartments, because I've gone through many infested places and mice infested places, and my apartments look like bathrooms in other people's homes now, but that doesn't matter. The point is, it was sort of an improvement in that respect, but it also put a lot of pressure on the things because I had to get a driver's license to drive because I didn't drive before. And I thought that I could, as New Yorkers get really jaded because you take your subway and you never have to think about anything else, but then you move to another city and you find out that your job is actually 25 miles away. So damn, you need to have a car. But the other thing what happened is we have sort of, during this course when I moved back to Boston, I met Lev, although we've met before, 7 years before. We didn't like each other, but we were aware of each other. And 7 years later, we met, we liked each other, we became friends, sort of moved in together very fast, got married. The reason I'm saying that is because all of this sort of happened within a year, because when I think we sort of became friends and started hanging out, I remember sitting in this bar in South End, which is an area, sort of a village-like area in Boston, and he pointed to the corner space. There was a furniture store there at the time, and he talked to me about he had this dream about opening a beauty store, like a beauty market. I mean, that was the words at the time, something that would just have abundance of things, and and you have to understand this was a very unique man because I have never met anybody that loved beauty products that much. I mean, the first time I've actually stayed at his house, and I was in the bathroom getting ready to leave. I looked under the sink looking for whatever I was looking for. I mean, the girls know what that means, and I screamed because I saw these little shopping bags filled with product. I mean, some of it wasn't even open, I mean, we're talking obsessed. He also had, he had a great capability of recognizing fragrance. I mean, I think I remember he gave me a scent in the first few weeks of our relationship, and I thought it was sort of the best scent I ever got, better than I would have even choose myself. I mean, it's just the understanding of what person's sort of character is and how it ties to the type of scent that you wear. I mean, it's a talent, somebody that doesn't know. But, the idea of that sounded really amazing, but we sort of talk about it, but nothing really, I mean, he had his own business. He's actually had this huge commercial cleaning company that he started by a year and a half before that by washing windows. And it's really only because he was trying to find what to do. And he was sort of in between projects, and he just sort of, went down the street and just walked into some store, had a bucket, said, can I wash your windows for $5? And that's how he started the business. At the time when I met him a year and a half later, I mean, it was like they were doing about $1.5 million revenues. And that's not something that was his passion or his interest or whatever, but it was just a way to get there, to move forward, to do something. That's truly an entrepreneurial spirit because he's not afraid. And
interesting that you sort of said, his proclivity and passion for fragrance. Just to give them context, when he was growing up in Russia, how many fragrances were available for men and how many were available for women?
It was the same pretty much when I was growing up, although, Lev left Russia with his mother when he was 11, and they left in early 70s, but there was only 2 fragrances in Russia, and they were called Red Moscow. There was Red Moscow for men, and there was Red Moscow for women. And it probably the closest thing to, a burning oil you'd ever probably smell. It's horrible. And everybody smelled of the same fragrance, except for people that really didn't. And in order to do that, I mean, they're the ones that try to go to black market and, find an opportunity to get access to something else, which, few women it did. And they would put literally a month's salary on a bottle of French perfume, just because it would transport them somewhere else, just would take away some of that grayness and, the fact is that, I mean, if you think about it, one of the best parts, what sort of adversity like that, or things people don't think of it as adversity, just the fact that you don't have 75 different kinds of butter in the store doesn't necessarily make you feel like you miss it, because as long as you can find one, because the problem is those are the people that had to stand on line to buy that one. My grandmother used to spend every day a few hours online just to get sort of groceries so she can make dinner for all of us at night. But it's part of sort of the circumstances, and the way you live. But what's special then? I'll never forget even sort of being at 16, watching when I was younger, my parents with their friends, sitting in the kitchen, drinking tea and, talking into the night. I know myself sort of as I got older, we were doing the same thing. And I'm sure you look it's your life, and sort of some of the special moments that you think about are the ones where you actually connect to other people. And it's not about sort of like where you were. You might not even remember where you were. You just remember that feeling, that energy, the connection, where like you weren't just alone with the phone or with, any kind of other way, but you were sort of in a group and you actually had a great conversation. How often do we have that?
It's very true. So the company that you're working for in Boston that has these valuable licenses loses its license.
Yeah, the company goes
goes
Chapter
into
11,
bankruptcy,
like so many.
and what happens to you? You're out
So
of a
here
job.
you find yourself, you're out of a job, yes. Like
Okay.
you've never been out of a job, you're out of a job, you actually got married. So you live in Boston of all places, and what am I going to do?
So your first business with Lev was not.
It wasn't my business.
It
I like
wasn't
to
a
say,
natural
as now
beauty.
looking back, but it was one of the little things that happened to be part of the businesses in the background.
So
but,
tell them what's Vanity Dry Cleaners.
Well, Vanity Dry Cleaners was a little enterprise that sort of, we got involved with somebody else, and it was a drop-off place at a high-end building, and it was supposed to operate itself. Here I find myself out of a job. I got to do something, so I guess I'm going to go into the dry cleaners. When we opened it, we sort of, Lev and I both look at it from a point of decor and the style, and obviously, even from the beginning, you want to sort of to make an environment that could be special and fitted for the type of public that we thought we were servicing. And one of the most important things being the fact that you do not see the clothes. So we created, we designed the dry cleaners, striped wallpaper, antique couch, curtains, protecting the clothes. So you'd walk in, it's just, it's a lounge, it's a parlor, except you go there to drop off your clothes. The thing is just to speed this forward in order to why you're bringing this is, the fact is that the idea of the beauty store sort of kept enrolling. I mean, we're doing research on products, we're trying to sort of find interesting products. And you have to understand that at the time, outside the department stores, there was really no other options. I mean, the Body Shop just really only starting in this country, and Body Shop is very specific. But what we were looking for ourselves, I mean, literally, we wanted a really high quality product that was natural, that had sort of an interesting history and artisanship, that wasn't just about marketing. And there was really not a lot of things like that in America yet. So of course, that sort of sends you back to the old countries, to France and Italy, because there's still, you find resources and small things. And we found a lot of information, we found resources. We were really ready to go with this, to start to do something with this. However, it wasn't like, okay, we're gonna start a business. It was literally, we want to do it, but, we had this dry cleaners and we had all the product information, and, we thought that, why not? Why do we have to wait for the space? Why should we just, put the products in the dry cleaners?
So you have a dry cleaners, and then in one weekend, the store is transformed. And what do you do in one weekend?
Biggest lesson. We got the products, we did a little renovation, we put the shelves up, a whole bunch of baskets and, stands and whatever. I mean, the soaps, it was, literally like day and night, Monday morning. And, there was a clear path to the counter and generally. And I will never forget that morning, when the door opens, when, 10 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock in the morning, I don't remember. And one of the regular customers comes in who lives in the building. Oh, yeah. And he walks in, he makes his way through what you just see on the screen, on those screens, but not on this screen.
Go ahead, we're going to show it to him in a second.
And, he comes to the front and he puts his shirts on the table and he says, starch, no hangers. He had to go around these things, and you have to
Go back, show them the Vanity Dry Cleaners, Nuts About Beauty split store that they converted one weekend, and the people that come in for dry cleaning don't even notice that.
I mean, some did eventually, but basically the first customer, didn't. And I think it was one of the very early business lessons is, your business is what it says. And when people are used to coming to a certain business to be a certain thing, it's very difficult to actually change a whole purpose of it.
Here's the outside. You can keep. Is that the inside of the first? Is that are we still in Nuts About Beauty?
We're still nuts.
Okay, we're still nuts. Are they nuts? Oh, look at that shot. So we'll wait till go to fresh in a second. That's sort of the next chapter. So in 1991, so you've got Nuts About Beauty in Boston. In 1991, the storefront that Lev has coveted and talked about becomes available.
Well, I think it happened about a month and a half after we opened Dry Cleaners. So this is all sort of like speed up, a very fast time. We go out, pick up something to eat, and he says he just went and he met with the landlord at that space on that corner in South End because there was a sign that it was for lease. So here's was our chance. I mean, we got very clearly knew that, you know, Vanity Dry Cleaners, Nuts About Beauty in Cambridge wasn't going to work. And this was a sign. You know, it's the fact is that, you know, when you imagine something somewhere, and I think specifically that space had a lot of obviously significance, not only because it was where it was, how it looked. Now you have to understand South End was not a huge retail location either. I mean, there was only a couple of retail stores. Mostly it was restaurants, Boston Center for the Arts, but it was a really cool area. There was really, you know, sort of interesting, well-traveled people lived there, and we lived there. I mean, that's to make it even simpler, but I think it was inevitable we had to do it, and we decided to jump.
He just asked you, are you ready? And you just...
It's like, should we do it? Yes. You know, this is the part where a moment of, and this happened many times over the years, where, except that, you know, when I was younger, I think that I thought I was just jumping in. As I got older, I realized that, you know, when you could make yourself feel completely neutral, and I mean, I don't know, that's how I think about how do you sort of listen to your instinct, you know, because you have two voices in your head. One is saying, you know, you should do it, or how can you do it because it's this, or you don't have the money, or you don't have this, or, you know, like, I mean, people are gonna laugh, or whatever, or that's the wrong thing. The other voice is like the voice of hope, like, but this would be so great, like, if you do it. How do you make one stronger than the other? You can't. How can you completely and totally try to focus yourself and center yourself in such a way that you can actually not listen to either of them? If you find a way to do it, then actually this sign will come to you. Seriously. You will know. You will feel what's right. But that's the only way to do it. And that's not a theory. It's not something I can, you know, teach, but I think every person knows what I'm talking about when you feel like something feels right, right?
Right.
I mean, I think that, you know, from the time when you're, you know, 3 years old and, you know, you see a couple of kids playing and in daycare in this particular thing, and whatever they're doing feels right and you want to join them. And when they, you know, let you play with them, because at that point I think everybody does, you know, you started on your way to make the right decisions.
So you mentioned all the things that you could think of, you know, it won't work, how could it go wrong, how do I get the money? How much money did it take to open that store,
well, I mean,
and where did you get it?
You know, it was a very naive approach at the time. You know, again, this isn't, you know, we didn't sit down and write a business plan and this is what it's going to be. The rent was $1,800. We knew what we had to pay in order to actually rent the store. We also knew what we would need to sort of place our first orders, and I think at the time this amount probably came to about $10,000 or, you know, something, $10,000, which obviously we didn't have. So we went to sort of prospective parents, and we asked if we could, you know, borrow from each. I had a couple of best friends who were architects, and one of them was a design build, and he built us a cash wrap. And so actually we did the renovation ourselves, and in July of 1991 we actually opened our real store.
And the name changes as well shortly thereafter. So what does the Fresh name mean back then?
You know, it's funny because, I mean, if you, and some of you probably do have ideas to start a business, you probably have a name, or maybe you don't, you know, how do you decide on a name, you know? I see what the biggest difference is when you're starting and it's just two of you and you make decisions. It's so easy in comparison to when you have a group, an executive team, and people around the table and everybody evaluates, you know, and there's a different response. But it was just sort of really, what did we want it to be? We wanted it to be sort of the environment in the world with a lot of options and a lot of, you know, comforting exploration, and, you know, trying to bring certain things that you care and passionate about to people that will walk in and you can take them through it. We wanted to be not connected to necessarily this particular field, but to everything else. And, it had to be a word that everybody understands, that means so much. And I mean, what other word really described that more than that? I think it was, with a few minutes, you bounce words back. I think we're driving in the car. There was no car phones yet.
To get that word is one thing. To get the domain is another. Fresh.com. That's worth some bucks right now. So congratulations for getting that. So let's talk about the growth and sort of you're at a single store. The two of you are still working this. It's your heart and soul.
It's really tough because when you're trying to do something, and we started sort of importing. Obviously, we were importing some lines. It wasn't yet. There was not a fresh product yet. The first 2 years, it just was really difficult because it wasn't a great retail location, so there was not a lot of foot traffic. I mean, we got a lot of appreciation from the locals. We got a lot of press. We actually even got some national press very fast. But that did not necessarily produce itself in business. So we're literally just sort of bouncing back. I say, borrowing money from Peter to pay Paul back and vice versa. And it was sort of a vicious circle because there was no capital. And, at the time, the banks wouldn't work with you because this type of inventory really did not present any value to the bank. So there was not really a bank relationship. So, I mean, where do you go? You want to grow, or you want to at least, you believe you have something that has a response. You believe that you're doing something that's really right for you, and fortunately for people that are coming into the store and buying it and responding to it. And, as it happens, by then I think we sort of came to a point where we decided we wanted to do our own product because, as you maybe get big in your breeches, or maybe you really understand what's missing, is what you can bring from other brands. And, we happen to both really love soap. I mean, and it may be coming from the fact of growing up, and there was one soap that was used basically in households. It was called baby soap, and it was used on me when I was a baby. It was used on laundry. It was used on everything else. Household soap called baby soap. So I guess you always look for something that you don't remember ever having. But the fact is that our store actually became sort of a really great resource for a lot of different options. We had all vegetable-based soaps and a lot of different variations of it. We were bringing a lot of different types, and we thought that would be sort of a way, probably the simplest way to bring the first fresh product to the stores. And we found a small producer in the south of France who agreed to make a small batch of our own product for us. And it wasn't sort of like a private label idea. It was literally, we could actually tweak the formula. Lev could work on the fragrance. Mm-hmm. So in 2.5 years later, we were able to do that.
And when did you know, or how did you know? What did you observe? Because you guys are on the sales floor with the customers, watching. And how do you know you have a hit?
Well, the things I could tell you, one thing is that you weren't really sure until we did our own soap, because at the time, now, I mean, you go to stores and, below $5 on soap is nothing. In those days, that was a lot of money. I mean, you had to sell somebody for 45 minutes to convince them. They buy a sandwich and it's gone right away, but that soap would last them 3 months. It took some time, but the interesting part is that when, our own sort of soap came in, and it's this oval soaps, they're still in our company, and they're called original soaps. And sort of we wrapped them in sort of this gray craft paper and wrapped the wire and these little semi-precious bead thing to decorate. We handwritten the flavors on them. They're sort of like these giant potatoes, sort of almost looking things, and there's just rows of them on the front table. And we noticed that people were coming in and they were sort of picking them up and just bringing them to counter, smelling them and just buying them. And those soaps were $7. And we didn't have to sell it. It was interesting because then they started coming back and buying more, and also talking about how they've been buying them as gifts initially, because obviously that was the acceptable thing. But sometimes people did not want to give themselves that luxury. But the recipient of the gift would tell them that this was great and they loved it, and now they wanted to try it. So you sort of felt like it was kind of a different magic, because there was a certain response to this product that was different from other products that were on the shelves at the time. And it sort of came at the same time as knowing that, we have something here, but what we have, we need to find a bigger audience for. And we knew we had to move our store. We were coming to the 3rd year of our lease in South End, and we knew we had to move to Newbury Street. I don't know if any of you had been to Boston or know where it is. It's sort of the shopping street in Boston. we had to find a new space and obviously build a space and, sort of to present fresh in the way how it needs to be. And the thing is that it was fresh by then. We did create a catalog because people were calling from other states. Do you have a catalog? We had to borrow some more money and have that.
We could show a couple pictures of your first stores, or your first store. Go to fresh, just keep going.
So this is the cover of our first catalog, actually. The soap that you see on the cover is actually hand-carved by a friend of mine, and I still have it. And this was the first time that the Fresh logo actually appeared, as it has for the last 20 years.
Go to the next slide.
This is
Build
Newbury
out.
Street.
Okay.
That's Newbury Street. So.
Is this Newbury Street?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the first store. So how much does one of your soaps retail these days?
I think these soaps are $13 now.
13.
So I would say not so bad for inflation.
Okay. So we're going to sort of skip forward in a couple things so the students can ask some questions. But you brought on an additional investor. You were growing. Your vision, your and Lev's vision, and the investor's vision sort of diverged. You bought that person out. So from the beginning, it never was, let's have a store. There was a larger vision.
I think that this is part of what, when you do certain things, we opened the store because there was a way to express a certain environment that, we wanted to be part of. I mean, I became as passionate about it as Lev had. Being able to actually speak about something that you care about, that is important to you, that you love, is very easy to share with somebody else. When somebody comes into your store, when somebody sells you something that they really care about. And by the way, this is sort of a key, because even as the years progressed, I mean, people that work in Fresh, they use the product and they love them. And that's why they actually can sell it in the stores, because there's no way you can do that otherwise. I mean, passion exists in everything, no matter what you do. So there has to be a personal reason to do anything, whether it's selling the product, talking about the product, writing, eating.
It's such an intimate product when you really think about it. You cover your body with it, you touch it, you can see the way it's handled. Even, what struck me is in the videos, still putting the label on by hand. I mean, it just seems very personal, the whole process. Let's talk about your wholesale growth.
I think that the way to,
Go ahead.
I'll try to finish that faster. And we knew right away, sort of like, what we wanted to do maybe wasn't going to necessarily, we knew exactly, what our 5-year plan was, but we did know that, we wanted this to give us more opportunities to express it in a bigger way. So it wasn't never going to be a mom and pop store. I mean, obviously, besides the fact that you can't live off that altogether, and but also because we just felt like we had something to say. And in order to do that, it required money. And, at the time, the options are to, find an investor, angel investor, or whoever that might want to sort of join you. And I think that was a really big key, because it was never really a question of giving away a chunk of your company for that, because it gives you an opportunity to step and move forward. And I would say we've done it a couple of times before we joined with our final partner 13 years ago. Because at the end of the day, as they say, whatever, a smaller piece of a bigger pie is much better than the whole pie, which is very, very small.
Sure.
Again, I mean, it might be wrong, it might be right for some people. I mean, I'm not saying that that's the way to do it.
No, but you saw that was the step in order for you to grow. You didn't have the capital. It's a tough I mean, being in a retail business is not easy. You constantly need money for inventory and growth, and especially when you're on this trajectory. If you're static, it's one thing, but if you're growing, you need money to finance.
It's constant capital
manufacturing.
investment, of course.
So you go to Barney's, and how long did you get a $10,000 order? How long does it take for them to sell through that?
We sell them the oval soaps. We ship them. We actually wrap them. We had to get a few extra people to help them wrap, because these soaps are still hand wrapped, because they can't be otherwise. And we received an order after Lev met with the cosmetics buyer in Barney's, and the soaps sell in like 3 days. We get a fax, a new order by fax, which is funny because at the time we had a fax line and a phone line, and if we were both on 2 lines, then we couldn't get the fax. I remember that the Neiman Marcus was trying to send us an order, our first order from Neiman Marcus. It was a very long fax, and both of us were on the phone answering. we couldn't get it, so they had to actually send it by Federal Express. But
They don't even deal with faxes anymore. It's just hilarious how things have changed.
I know, what's fax?
So
right?
in the growth, Barney's, Neiman's, it catches fire with celebrities. It becomes, one of Oprah's favorite things. You go from 8 to 35 SKUs. You pass $1 million
Actually,
in
from
revenue.
8 to 30. We're all describing the first year.
Yeah. 200 accounts, grow for 3 stores. You get a 35,000 square foot facility in Boston. A couple years later, you open up in New York, which has got to be a dream come true for you. But talk about the importance of Sephora in the distribution, their philosophy, the way they merchandise, and how that fits so neatly
Sephora
with-
came to this country in '98, and I think that it was sort of created a huge stir because in the way how the products are merchandised in Sephora, all the brands are equal. Everybody's presented the same way. I mean, when you walk into that store, you sort of like, by the judgment and authority of the store, you know what's interesting. And it's not by necessarily the size of the company and how it's presented. So a lot of big brands did not go to Sephora in the beginning because they felt for that same exact reason that, the big advertising and big space and location that they have in department stores, all of a sudden small brands are getting this exact same presentation in this environment. So it took some larger brands time to get into Sephora. But on the other hand, it was really great for smaller companies like us and, at the time, companies like Benefit and Stila, who actually weren't huge in those days. And, when you come to a Sephora store at the time, people were actually exposed to these brands that they've never seen before or heard before. And for us, it was an opportunity to expose our product to people in, geographical locations that we would have never been able to access by having our own store.
And it's a smart strategy on their part in that, if you want the department store experience, go to the department store. They created something that was different. And it also fit in with your philosophy of, like you said, you never wanted to be behind a counter and separate from the customer and giving them the experience.
It's that whole sort of idea of the open cell. And but within a multi-branded environment, you have your own sort of challenges as well. When we were just selling soap in Barney's, we did not compete with any other brands. It was just, a basket of soaps. When you're in a situation where there's a lot of other brands, how do you tell your story just through your products? What you communicate through it. I mean, this is one of the biggest challenges that every day we work on, through how you merchandise product. What do you say with it? How do people know what to buy? You come in front of, they call them a gondola. How do you choose the product that's the right product for you? Or, it's a very loud environment. How do you do it? That's why, your own retail, of course, is the best expression of your own world. And your own fresh experience for us is something that we work on diligently recreating, because that's the part of sort of like where the brand moves forward. How do you take piece of that when you open in other countries and other languages? How can you continue communicating the same image, the same message, mainly? Because at the end of the day, it's sort of, no matter how many different languages people speak, we all sort of live in this world and we're of this world. We get the message.
So this is the last chapter I want to cover before we allow the students to ask you questions. So let's skip forward to 2000. So you've been in business really for 9 years, right? 91 to 2000. And you get contacted not just by LVMH, but by several people interested in it. So tell us how you were contacted by LVMH and sort of what attracted you to them. First of all, LVMH stands for?
Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy.
And it's a large?
It's a huge luxury group. I'm sure that has many different brands that they're part of. I mean, in different fields, in perfumes and cosmetics, in fashion. Obviously, Dior, Christian Dior is part of that. You have the liquors and wines and spirits is part of that as well. And sort of they own beautiful brands like the Dom Perignon and Veuve Clicquot and the Belvedere vodka and all those good stuff.
So this high-end luxury brand conglomerate. How do they contact you? Why do they stand out to you? And answer that first.
Okay. So this is, 2000, and this was sort of the time when it was I think it was a very common, there's a lot of sort of interesting mergers going on. Large companies were buying small indie brands. I mean, in fact, I believe that was invented in those days, right, Jill? The whole concept of the indie brand. So it was literally, coming to work one morning, I pick up the phone in my voicemail, and this is, hello, my name is such and such, and I'm from LVMH, and I would love to talk to you about your business. You know, it's kind of an interesting thing to get on Monday morning. You know, there's a part of that, obviously, you know, the exciting aspect of that, it was a luxury group that has, you know, the world-known brands, some of them with huge history, you know, 300-400 years. The fact of thinking about that your company could become part of a certain group which would give it, you know, longevity and global legs, as well as some amazing background and research. I mean, the Dior and LVMH laboratories was a huge, big candy that was being flashed in front of us as part of, you know, how, you know, whether we attracted to that. Of course we were. However, see, the part for us, we weren't looking to sell our company. I mean, we were still young. We wanted to work and grow it. But I think the opportunity of getting a little more insurance as to that the company could have potential to go beyond of where we could do at the time, even though sort of like we were going strong and developing, we finally started a relationship with the bank. I mean, sort of things were happening in the right way. I mean, we had quite a few people that joined that were coming on a very different sort of level of management, you know, because you were sort of learning. But at the same time, the dynamic of sort of like getting roots from a company that has roots in so many different brands was very, very compelling. But then, you know, we also got called from Estee Lauder and Pooch and another group. And, you know, we met with everybody. And I think that the one thing we knew is, you know, with some of these other companies is that we felt that it just was going to take over and absorb us. And we felt Fresh needed to remain independent. We wanted to still be the leads of it. We wanted to run it. We did not want to sell it. And it seemed like, you know, being part of a group rather than being bought by a company was a right strategic decision for us. And so we decided to go ahead and, you know, we partnered with them.